Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me today. I'm Samantha Ludwig, the Market Development Agronomist for Cargill, covering the Edmonton, Leduc, and Camrose areas. With seeding in full swing, I wanted to discuss early season insects that you should be watching for as crops emerge, as well as their control measures and thresholds. If you have any questions throughout this, feel free to contact your Cargill rep or myself. So first, we'll start off with a brief summary of insects in Alberta that are of more widespread concern that you're likely very familiar with. The four I'm going to focus on today are the earliest to emerge in central northwest Alberta, and those are flea beetles, cutworms, pea-leaf weevils, and wireworms. Specifically, I'll share some general guidelines for scouting, including where and when to look for them, what crops or weeds they prefer to feed on, and what part of their life cycle is of greatest concern. Lastly, I'll touch on control options that can be used as well as thresholds for chemical control. So first, let's take a look at what is likely to cause the most problems earliest in the season, flea beetles. The three main species of flea beetle found in Western Canada are the hop, striped, and crucifer flea beetles, which emerge in that order. They emerge from leaf litter shortly after the ground thaws. Crucifer flea beetle is most prominent, with striped populations growing across Western Canada. To date, hop haven't been considered to be much of a concern. Unfortunately, it's not a matter of if you'll find flea beetles in your crop, but when. They're widespread across the prairies, but their damage depends a lot on seasonal conditions and how many are present in your field. Their activity begins to peak at about 15 degrees Celsius, and at 20 degrees or higher, they become much more active and can fly several miles in search of food. Scouting for flea beetles regularly is very important in warm, sunny weather. Flea beetles have one generation per year in Western Canada, but will see adults twice in the growing season. Overwintered adults will emerge in the spring when temperatures warm up enough, and they'll feed on weeds like volunteer canola or mustard, wild mustard, flaxweed, lamb's quarters, stinkweed, or peppergrass. Then when canola emerges, they'll move on to the canola seedlings. Flea beetles start laying eggs at the end of May and into July. Sometimes it can go into August depending on seasonal conditions. They'll lay their eggs in the soil next to the plant roots, which hatch about 12 days later. The adults die off after laying the eggs. The emerged larvae then feed on the root hairs and taproots of seedlings, and then they'll pupate. The flea beetle pupae are white except for their eyes and darken as their pupal stage continues to completion. And this process usually takes about a week to 9 days. The adult beetles will then emerge, usually in mid-July, and continue into the fall, and they'll feed on the leaves, stems, and pods of cruciferous plants. In late August and September, the adults will move into leaf litter to overwinter, and the process starts again. So when you're scouting for flea beetles, make sure to scout into the middle of the field. Flea beetles will often begin feeding on plants on the edge of the field, and then they'll move inwards. So the damage to the entire crop may not be as bad as you initially expected, just pulling into an approach. If the weather is cool and wet in the spring, check underneath the leaves or anywhere the beetles may go for cover to escape less than ideal conditions, like any leaf litter or somewhere close to the ground. It's also really important in warm, sunny weather to be scouting every 2 to 3 days. It's also a great idea to scout for flea beetles in the fall as pods are maturing to get a good sense of what you might be dealing with next spring. When it comes to reducing overall flea beetle populations, there are several cultural measures that can be helpful. Reduced or zero-till creates an inhospitable environment for flea beetles because the soil stays cooler and it holds more moisture, and they don't like that. Keeping your fields as clean as possible early in the season is also important. As mentioned earlier, flea beetles will begin feeding on a preferred food source as soon as it's out of the ground. So if you have a high population of lamb's quarters or stinkweed in your field, for example, or even volunteer canola, and the daytime temperatures are high enough for flight, flea beetles will find that food source. Then, when your canola seedlings emerge, they'll move on to continue feeding. Establishing a good plant stand and using an appropriate seeding rate are also really important. This helps with weed competition, but also helps prevent high amounts of yield loss from a drastically reduced stand if they're feeding on your plants a lot. Choosing a seeding date that allows for quick germination and growth past the 4-leaf stage is also very helpful, especially for helping insecticide seed treatment efficacy. The seed treatments that are currently on the market for canola, along with other cruciferous crops, provide extended control during the flea beetle feeding time, but only within a specific window. Seed treatment efficacy lasts for about 14 to 21 days. So if the seed goes in too early and takes longer to germinate, you can lose your flea beetle control before the crop has matured past a 4-leaf stage. And flea beetles generally will feed on the younger seedlings, and the canola has a greater potential to outgrow the damage past 4-leaf. It's also important to remember that current insecticide seed treatments don't work the same as older seed treatments, such as Lindane. The flea beetles need to ingest some of the plant to ingest the insecticide. They don't have repellent properties. As mentioned previously, flea beetles target the leaves of young canola plants up to about the 4-leaf stage, so start checking for damage early. If the damage isn't too severe, the plants should be able to outgrow it. You want to look for distinctive shot holes, as you can see in the pictures, that can lead to complete defoliation if the population is high enough. The action threshold for applying a foliar insecticide is about 25% defoliation or about 10% stem damage while the beetles are still feeding. You don't want to be spraying a foliar insecticide if they're done feeding, because you'll just be spraying out your money. Damage beyond that 25%, especially more than 50%, can have a significant impact on the plant and reduce your overall yield. As mentioned before, check your entire field, not just the edges, and remember that some feeding will need to occur for seed treatment insecticides to work. And check often, every 2 to 3 days in warm weather. If you decide a foliar insecticide is needed based on damage and active feeding, make sure to choose a product that will target flea beetles specifically, and always read and follow the label. As mentioned, if you have any further questions or need guidance throughout the growing season, please feel free to contact your local rep or myself. Thanks for joining us today. Bye.